What's up, Green Bay Packers fans? Welcome back, and as always, thank you for joining me. My name's Paul Brettel. The Green Bay Packers released their final injury report ahead of their matchup with the Kansas City Chiefs. We are here to break it down and talk about the potential impact of these injury designations on Sunday's game. But first, hit like on the video, hit subscribe on the YouTube channel. I do greatly appreciate it. You can find all my work over at Packers Wire, and you can follow me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel. So like I said, Packers released their final injury report. There are a number of key players that have questionable designations. They're going to be without Aaron Jones. So let's dive in and go through each of those players. Let's start with the secondary, where there are still a number of injuries that the Packers are dealing with. First up, Jair Alexander and Rudy Ford are both listed as questionable. Both players seem to be trending in the right direction. Joe Barry spoke with us on Thursday and said that both Ford and Alexander had really good practices during the week. They came into each of those days feeling good after the practice before. And of course, that's always a good sign. As players are limited, how do they respond the next day as they're working through those injuries? So those are good signs. Both of those players seem to be trending in the right direction. And when it comes to the safety position specifically, Matt LaFleur talked about this. I wrote an article about it over at Packers Wire. Like, the Packers have some decisions to make when it comes to who's going to be starting at the safety position, because in Savage's absence, in Rudy Ford's absence, Jonathan Owens has filled in fairly well. He's taken some lumps, but over this 5-game span where he's been one of the starters, he ranks 13th among all safeties in PFF's tackling grade. He ranks 4th among all safeties in terms of tackles against the run. And that's his calling card. That's his bread and butter. That last season as a starter with the Houston Texans, that's where Jonathan Owens was at his best in run defense as a tackler. He's proved to be willing and capable in both of those areas. And as we know, that's an area where this Packers team can always use some additional help, some additional reinforcements. Now, so what do the Packers do when Ford's healthy, when Darnell Savage is healthy? I think those two are still going to be the Packers starting safeties. I think what they'll do is they'll run with those two as the starters. You know, Ford, to his own credit, is again someone who's proven to be a willing and capable tackler, someone who can help against the run, but he's provided much more stability from a coverage standpoint, not just this season in Green Bay, but last season with the Texans. That element hasn't been a strong suit of Jonathan Owens. So I think they'll stick with Rudy Ford as a starter next to Darnell Savage, because he just brings a more well-rounded game to that position. I think Jonathan Owens will then slide into that third safety role. When we see the Packers in dime, they have their 3 safeties on the field, one of them closer to a line of scrimmage. I think we could see Jonathan Owens used in that capacity. So what I just went through there, that's what I think the Packers are going to do. What I would like to see them do is kind of similar to what we're seeing on the offensive line, where they're having a rotation at left tackle, a rotation at right guard, and LaFleur, Luke Butkus, Adam Stenavich, they've all talked about how that rotation has, increased the competitiveness within those two specific position groups, and they think that it's really helped elevate the level of play. My hope would be that you would see similar results if you put in play a safety rotation, so to speak. Now, I don't think this should be, every other series we're swapping guys in and out, but I think more matchup based, situation based would determine who's playing and how often they're playing. So what I would like to see happen is, again, Ford and Darnell Savage are your starters. I would like to see Anthony Johnson in that dime safety role. Again, 7th round rookie, still getting his feet wet in the NFL, still transitioning to the safety position. Remember, this is only his 2nd season playing that position. He was a cornerback for 4 seasons while at Iowa State. But in that dime safety role, that player has gotten anywhere from 6 to 7, sometimes 8 to 10 snaps per game. Keeps him involved, gets him on the field, gets him some additional reps. When it comes to Jonathan Owens, if it's an obvious running situation, a short yardage situation, I would love to see him worked onto the field in those scenarios as well. Again, playing to his strengths, playing to what he does well. So with those 4 players, that's how I think it could be beneficial for each of them individually, but also the defense, the position group as a whole, in terms of how they utilize them. Now, again, I don't think that's going to be the case. I think Savage and Ford are going to dominate the snaps moving forward. But nonetheless, for a position group that had so many question marks, so many unknowns, the fact that they do have shown that they have, 3, even 4 players that they can put in and rely on to a degree if needed, I think is a better spot that the Packers are in than I'm sure what many would have guessed, 4, 5, 6 months ago at this time. Sticking with the safety position, Darnell Savage is listed as questionable. My expectation is that he's going to be out on the field on Sunday. He was a full participant in all three practices this week. Matt LaFleur said earlier in the week that they're hopeful to get him back. And this version of Darnell Savage that we've seen this season, one, has been improved on the football field. I know there's still missed tackles. There's still areas where he has to improve upon, but he is flying around. He is in much better positions to make plays on the ball carrier in run defense or on the pass catcher. Out of 88 eligible safeties, he ranks 28th in PFF's run defense grade and 30th among those 88 safeties in run stops this season. Again, he's been much more aggressive, flying around the field, putting himself in better positions to make plays on that ball carrier. Now, he hasn't always made them. Missed tackles are still an issue. But again, we're seeing a more aggressive and capable version of Darnell Savage this season. And I'll just add this caveat. I know PFF grades aren't the be-all, end-all by any means. But I think what they do help illustrate is when a player is performing well, the grades reflect that. Same thing on the other end of the spectrum. When a player is performing poorly, the grades reflect that as well. So we're seeing these grades reflect an improved version of Darnell Savage, and again, in that capacity. On the back end in coverage, he's allowing just over 10 yards per catch, so has done a good job in limiting those big plays when the ball does come his direction. Now, having said all that, Matt LaFleur on a few different occasions, including this week, has gone on and on about Savage and what he's brought to the team this season. And a lot of it's been about the on-field but off-field too, in terms of his leadership. Matt LaFleur's talked about glowingly how Darnell Savage has improved in that area, and not just in the safety room, not just amongst the defensive backs, but on this team as a whole. Throughout the time that Darnell Savage was on IR, we're sitting in the press box and obviously have a good view of the sidelines, what is taking place pregame. And Savage, during that time where he was out, he was on injured reserve. He was in the middle of a lot of those, pre-game moments to help bring some energy, to spark his position group, his defensive back room. And when Matt LaFleur was asked, is that normal when a player is on injured reserve? Do you see that type of engagement still? He said not at all, and then again went into the leadership role that Darnell Savage has taken on. So again, improved aspects that we're seeing from Darnell Savage across a variety of phases for him this season. And like I said, I expect, my guess is that he's going to be out there on Sunday. Last up in the secondary, Eric Stokes is doubtful. Not surprising whatsoever. He just returned to practice this week. He's still on injured reserve. I imagine he's going to need at least 1, if not 2 weeks to help ramp up and get back into close enough to playing shape to be able to go out on the football field. Remember, his last time making his way back, he was only playing special team snaps against Denver. That's when he suffered this hamstring injury. And to my knowledge, this is the second hamstring injury he's had during the summer, as he is working his way back from that foot injury, that knee injury, and a hamstring injury at that time set him back. So Matt LaFleur talked about how they are going to be very mindful of what they did previously in terms of trying to ramp Eric Stokes up and taking that into consideration, how they navigate that this time around. But I would guess he's at least a week, if not 2 weeks away from being back and on the football field. And again, even at that point, it's been a long time. Week 9 of last season was when he suffered that original injury. There's going to be a ramp-up period when he gets back. He's just not all of a sudden going to be back out there starting across from Jair Alexander. Robert Rochelle, he's questionable as well. Missed 2 practices this week, was limited, but available on Friday. And his role when available on game days, he's been a primary special teams player. Sticking with the defense, Devondre Campbell, again, listed as questionable. He suffered a neck stinger during that LA Chargers game. He exited that game in the second half, did not play against the Detroit Lions. He's been a limited participant in each of the practices this week. And when defending this Chiefs team, and I'm gonna circle this back and talk about the secondary as well. There's the obvious challenge: Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce. We know that, but from a scheme standpoint, how the Packers go about defending Kansas City, I'm really curious to see because, again, you have Patrick Mahomes. He can push the ball downfield. He's someone who can make any throw on the football field. Naturally, you would want to try to protect against some of those bigger plays. Put a lot of your attention, I should say, on Travis Kelce. But in terms of pass attempts downfield of 20 or more yards, Patrick Mahomes actually ranks in the middle of the pack this season. In terms of percent of throws, 20 or more yards downfield, he ranks 27th in the NFL. Like, the Chiefs collectively are not pushing the ball downfield, relatively speaking, in comparison to the rest of the NFL, in comparison to the number of plays that they run, all that much. Where the bulk of Mahomes' passes are going are behind the line of scrimmage or within 10 yards. He ranks first among all quarterbacks in pass attempts behind the line of scrimmage. He's seventh among quarterbacks in pass attempts in that 0 to 9 yard range. This Chiefs team is really, really good at picking up yards after the catch. They're first in the NFL in total yards after the catch. Rashee Rice ranks 8th in yak average. Sky Moore ranks 13th in yak average. Even Kadarius Toney, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, they rank in the top third of all receivers in yak average. Running back Isaiah Pacheco, again, he's in the top 15 among running backs in that category. This Chiefs team is really, really good at picking up yards after the catch. So from the safeties, the cornerbacks, the linebackers, whether it's Devondre Campbell and Quay Walker, Isaiah McDuffie and Quay Walker, tackling is always important. We know that. But it's going to be in an absolute premium. It's going to take all 11 defenders, one, being on the same page, being in the right spot, and swarming to the ball carrier to try to limit those yards after the catch opportunities. For those in the secondary, the linebackers, it's going to be reading your keys, diagnosing what you're seeing, and really trusting what you're seeing and reacting to it, again, to put yourself in position to hopefully limit those yak opportunities. Last thing I'll say on this, and we've seen it for years now, Joe Barry talked about on Thursday, but Patrick Mahomes' ability to create off script is incredibly impressive. He's dynamic. He can wreck your defense by going off script, roaming around, and still finding an open receiver, either downfield or, again, in open space for those yak opportunities. And Barry added that the 5 skill position players, when Patrick Mahomes buying time, he said it's incredibly synchronized. It's like they're all on the same wavelength in terms of spacing, knowing where to go, where to find the soft spot, where to create those opportunities. So when we think about this Chiefs offense, we think about Patrick Mahomes, that arm talent, that ability to push the ball. And that's 100% there. It's something the Packers have to account for. But where this Chiefs team has found a lot of success this season, again, it's those short area throws, yards after the catch. And that's absolutely something that's going to have to be on the Green Bay Packers radar. Let's switch to the offensive side of the ball. Josiah DeGuara, he's listed as questionable, still dealing with a hip injury that he suffered against the Chargers that kept him out of the Detroit Lions game the other week. Really, our tell for if he's going to be on the field or not this week is going to be if Henry Pearson, the fullback on the practice squad, is elevated again, just as he was prior to the Detroit game. If DeGuara is available, obviously they're shorthanded at tight end. They don't have Luke Musgrave. I still think he's going to primarily take on that fullback role, which is what he's been able to embrace more this season. Tucker Kraft's still going to be tight end 1. Ben Sims, I think, is going to slide into more of that previous Tucker Kraft role out there, basically just to be an inline blocker. We might see DeGuara, or I guess we would see DeGuara maybe a few additional snaps in that capacity, but I still think his role, even without Luke Musgrave, is going to remain relatively intact. And again, talking about what this Chiefs team does well and how that impacts the tight end position, the fullbacks, the running backs. This Chiefs team, they blitz a ton. I mean, quarterbacks coach Tom Clements said it the other day. They're not just blitzing because they're going against Jordan Love and a young quarterback and a young offense. This is what they do. The Chiefs rank 6th in blitz rate this season. They rank 2nd in pressure rate as well. Not only do they blitz, but they're effective at getting home. They're in fact effective at disrupting the quarterback and converting those opportunities into sacks. Cornerback Trent McDuffie has the most pass rush snaps out of any cornerback in the NFL. L'Jarius Sneed, their other cornerback, ranks 19th in that category. Safety Justin Reed ranks 11th in pass rush opportunities out of safeties. And they have 3 linebackers ranked in the top 50 out of 150, so the top third of the NFL in pass rush snaps. Like Tom Clements said, the Chiefs don't just blitz, they'll blitz anyone from anywhere. No one is off limits in terms of going after the quarterback. And it's not just from point A to point B. They'll disguise it. They'll switch it up on who's going, where they're coming from, what looks they're giving Jordan Love in this Packers offense. So that pre-snap communication between the offensive line, identifying what those looks are, is going to be so important in terms of protection adjustments before the ball's even snapped. Josh Myers last week talked about how, from his perspective, as I just mentioned, the communication aspect of it, but, being mindful of, all right, what personnel are they in? What does the defensive front look like? What movements did they just make pre-snap to help the Packers offensive line, Jordan Love, figure out, all right, where's the pressure likely coming from in this situation? Because, again, that is what this Chiefs defense does. They'll blitz the heck out of the quarterback. Next up, Aaron Jones. He's not going to play. I don't think that comes as a big surprise to anyone. Still working his way back from that MCL sprain. Did not practice at all this week. A.J. Dillon, who was listed on the injury report, does not have an injury designation. He is going to be a full go in Sunday's game. And the run game, although shorthanded, although hasn't been a strength of this Packers offense this season, I think it might have to play a key role in Sunday's game. We just talked about the Chiefs blitzing, their ability to get after the quarterback. They also have just a really aggressive secondary. They're physical. They'll press you. They'll go after the ball. But where this Chiefs defense has been susceptible is in the ground game, especially over the last month. Raiders running back Josh Jacobs, I believe, averaged close to 7 yards per carry against Kansas City. DeAndre Swift was around 6 yards per rush. Raheem Mostert, again, in that 6 yard range as well in terms of yards per carry. And a month ago, when the Denver Broncos were able to beat Kansas City 24-9, they didn't find this huge amount of success on the ground. I think they averaged as a team just 3.8 yards per rush, but they ran the ball 40 times. And again, that's a product to a degree of, hey, we're leading late in the game, want to run out the clock. Puffs up those overall numbers a little bit, but still 40 rush attempts is a ton. Like, that was part of their game plan. They came into that game saying, all right, here's what we need to do, slow the game down, and here's how we can try to best move the ball on this Kansas City defense. Now, it's great for me to say that. It's great for me to point that out. Packers obviously know all this stuff as well, but the execution of it is the other half of the equation. And as I mentioned originally, hasn't been there for Green Bay. One, they're shorthanded. Aaron Jones is out. A.J. Dillon is going to have to handle the workload. Patrick Taylor is going to be running back too. They'll likely elevate from the practice squad James Robinson to be there as that emergency option. But even at full capacity, like, this has not been an offensive line or run game this season that has been able to find a lot of success. They're averaging as a team right now 4.1 yards per rush, which ranks 20th in the NFL. And that number's that 20th overall ranking, that 4.1 yards per rush, that's a little inflated by some of the recent success that they've had. And the recent success is still not that great either. They were able to find some success against the Rams in the run game. I believe the Steelers in the run game as well. But again, this is a unit that has struggled to get going on the ground. So it's going to be an interesting dynamic to see, all right, how do they come out attacking this Chiefs defense? If we look back at the Lions game, again, that's a really, really good defensive front, did a really, really good job on the season of getting after the quarterback. But as you look at that Lions defense as a whole and think, all right, where do we need to attack it? It's through the air. You don't want to challenge that front seven, or you want to stay away from doing so as often as you can. So it made sense that the Packers came out wanting to throw the ball. This week, still going up against a team as a whole, in part because of their ability to blitz and generate pressure that way, that does really good at getting after the quarterback. But the susceptible part of that unit has been on the ground game, which, as we just talked about, happens to be one of the weaker points of this Packers offense. So going to be an interesting chess match, game of cat and mouse to watch as things unfold. Lastly, Dontavian Wicks, Jayden Reed, both listed as questionable. Jayden Reed, he was available at his locker on Thursday and gave us a little additional insight into the chest injury that he's experiencing. What he did tell us was he suffered that injury very early on in the Chargers game. Then, as we all know, he played against Detroit as well. So he's played almost 2 full games while dealing with this injury. He did not specify what it specifically was that was bothering him. And he also added that right now the time, because he did miss 2 days of practice this week. He was limited on Friday. That time off was more to give the injury the ability to rest, the ability to heal, because that's what it needs right now. And when he was, asked specifically, what's the impact of this on Sunday's game, he sounded hopeful that there wasn't going to be any and that he could be out there, which obviously would be a huge boost for this Green Bay Packers offense. Dontavian Wicks, he missed the Detroit game in concussion protocol. He has been out of that this entire week. Monday, when Matt LaFleur met with us, at that point, he said that Wicks had cleared concussion protocol, but he is on the injury report with a knee injury. Not sure where that popped up, where that came from. He was a limited participant in all 3 practices this week. In Wicks' absence against Detroit, a combination of a Christian Watson breakout game and a really, really efficient performance by Malik Heath helped cover up Wicks' absence. And it goes without saying, I don't need to deep dive into the impact that these two have had on this Packers team over the last month. Like, they've been a huge, huge part of the surge that this offense has had, helping to generate big plays, creating yards after the catch. Both possess this sixth sense to find the soft spot in the defense and find their way open, and again, generating big plays that way. So hopefully they're going to be able to go, because like we've already talked about, blitz heavy Chiefs defense, aggressive secondary. Packers are going to need all their receivers and going to need them playing well. So there you have it, my friends. There's a breakdown of the Green Bay Packers' final injury report prior to their matchup with the Kansas City Chiefs. As always, I appreciate you tuning in. Hit like on the video. Hit subscribe on the YouTube channel. I greatly appreciate it. You can follow me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel. And you can find all my work over at Packers Wire. So until next time, friends, take care, stay safe, and as always, go Packers.